Morning, everyone. It is March 14th, 2023. It's 9 a.m., and this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Fort Myers Beach Local Planning Agency. If you would, please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. May we all have and continue to strive to do the best for Fort Myers Beach and our community, looking forward and not behind. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. LPA members, if you could say your names for the record, just so the transcriber can get used to us.
Good morning. I'm Scott Safford.
Good morning, Doug Ekman.
Good morning, Jim Bowen.
Anita Saracita.
Don Suddeth.
Jane Plummer is running late. Is my microphone working? John, is it? Yeah, I guess it is. Okay. Better? Yeah. First item on the agenda is an approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as they were distributed or with any corrections?
So moved.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jim. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing none, public comment is over. Next, whoa, we're clipping right through this. The next item is our first public hearing. I can't tell. I feel like this is bleeping in and out. Is it? It is. Let me just get this one. Try this one. Jane's not here anyway. Okay. First public hearing is DCI 202-315, rezoning from CPD to institutional for 2545 Estero Boulevard. Jason, you're a presenter today. Good morning.
Madam Chair, before
Yes,
we
sir.
begin this, I want to disclose that my wife is a fire commissioner, so I'd like to talk to our town attorney, see if I can be a part of this.
Thank you, Scott.
Based upon the fact that this is an advisory body and based upon my conversations with the LPA member, Sanford, that there's going to be no financial gain. There isn't a prohibited conflict of interest that would limit his ability to take part in the discussion and vote on the matter. Finally, before you begin, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, so it would be appropriate to disclose any ex parte communications you may have had, and then we'll swear in the witnesses.
Thank you, John. Scott, any ex parte?
Yes, I'm very familiar with the project, as my wife is a commissioner.
Thank you, Scott. Doug, any ex parte communication?
No, ma'am.
Jim?
No ex parte communication.
Pat? And Don?
No.
I'm very familiar with the project, but I've had no direct conversation about it. Okay, and anybody who's going to participate in the hearing, would you please stand and be sworn in? Anybody that's going to be speaking at all?
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? A witness has been sworn.
Thank you, John. You're on, Jason.
Good morning, LPA members. Happy Pi Day if you celebrate.
Happy what day?
Happy Pi Day, 314.
What is pi? Oh, for the mathematicians in the room. Pi day.
So I'm here today to briefly introduce the project before you, the requested rezone. As was mentioned in the staff report, this is a request to rezone from the current CPD or commercial plan development that exists on the property. With the previous development gone, the request today is to rezone into an institutional use for a planned public safety campus, including the new fire department. The request today is mainly derived because of the uses that were previously approved under the existing CPD, which was for the Top Supermarket, which was obviously a commercial retail location. The new uses themselves will be obviously focused more on institutional and civic uses. Are there questions or concerns for the staff in our process here? The applicants are here to answer any questions that you may have directly for them.
Thank you very much, Jason. Does anybody have any questions for Jason? None? It was pretty clear. Thank
Excellent.
you very much, Jason. Appreciate that. And now we'll entertain, Greg, are you going to make the presentation or is Chief Martin? Chief Martin, good morning.
Good morning, LPA members. For the record, Ronald Martin, Fire Chief, District Manager, Fort Myers Beach Fire Control District. I am going to turn it over to our team of talented civil engineers here in a minute. I just wanted to speak and introduce the project to you from the Fire Chief's aspect. This is and will be, hopefully, someday, our community's newest fire station. It will be a multi-company fire station. We are planning on bringing several of our services together under one facility, a fire station in both our business office, along with some of our training needs, along with our a place for our Board of Fire Commissioners to meet, centrally located, so they're available to all their constituents as well. We look forward to your review of the project, and we look forward to bigger, stronger, brighter future for Fort Myers Beach, with the Fort Myers Beach Fire Control District standing that line, protecting this community as we have since 1949. Thank you for your consideration this morning, and we look forward to future discussions.
Chief, don't leave. I just have to take this opportunity to thank you and all of your team for the extraordinary effort that you gave to this community. You always do, but in the last 5.5 months, I know it's been monumental, and I hope you know how much you're appreciated.
Well, I certainly appreciate that comment, but I would be remiss if I tried to take any of that credit. The people that work under my command are the people who have done the amazing job and continue to do the amazing job in service to this community. So thank you, and I will share those comments with them.
Thanks. Good morning, Mr. Stewart. That's that. Jane, I'm sorry Jane's not here. She would love this. She loves some paper. You can put it right here. I don't know if she'll get here in time or not, but thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, fellow members of the LPA. Greg Stewart, representing Al Catrone. I have been qualified as an expert in urban and regional land use planning, urban design, and land development in front of this board and others. So my qualifications are on the record, and I believe staff still has a copy of my resume. This is really straightforward in terms of the request. Page 2 of the presentation shows that we are downzoning the property from CPD to an institutional IN uses. There are 2 parcels, both combined consist of 2.16 acres. The conventional zoning application is to support, as Chief Martin said, a new fire station and emergency response facility. On page 3, we're showing the de-intensification from 85,000 square feet to a public facility use. The public facility use is needed because the fire district bought the property a few years ago. The former CPD ordinance 0808 was the Tops shopping center. It relied, along with the current rezoning application, relies on the boulevard land use. It's important to note that the civic land use allows for this type of institutional zoning, so we have the use by right subject to getting the conventional zoning. If you look at your code 34649A, we are in compliance with that. The rule provides for suitable regulations for civic and governmental buildings, such as what we're proposing. So we're consistent with the code. When you look at the basis, good morning, if you look at the basis for rezoning as per your code, starting on page 4, does this correct an error or an ambiguity? Yes, it does, because the top center CPD no longer is in existence. The building was demolished, I believe, in 2018. So it corrects an ambiguity because the ordinance is no longer functionally valid. Are there change in conditions? Yes, the change in condition, as per page 5, is that the property was bought by the Fire Control District, so it's slipped into the public sector realm rather than the private sector realm. Page 6, are there land development code impacts? Does it comply with the LDC? Yes, it does comply with the with the LDC. There are no non-compliance issues with the code. And again, if you look at 34.2, your use table, the uses fit by right within the boulevard land use. And then also when you look at, as I pointed out, 34.649A, this presents a suitable regulation for downzoning going from a CPD to a conventional. And then finally, as I pointed out, as a de-intensification, the current uses by right allows for a full spectrum of retail, hotel uses, offices, medical, all that stuff is going to be stricken from the use by right. So again, it's a de-intensification rezoning. Is the project consistent with the town's comprehensive plan? Yes, it does. Page 7 points out it's consistent with policy 4B5 Boulevard. It's consistent with 3A2 civic structures. It's consistent with 4A3 protect residential neighborhoods. And then when you look at the intergovernmental coordination element on page 14.5, this has been long in the works. There's always the plan has called for a new facility, so here we are. So we're in compliance with intergovernmental coordination. Page 8 shows the site plan. I also brought a full copy here if you want to take a look at it. As a conventional zoning, the plan is, this is an actual construction plan. It may change. It's certainly not a master concept plan within the context of a CPD. The site plan shows for the two facilities, the parking and circulation and the like. So it accurately reflects what is going to be built, albeit there could be some minor changes as we get into the actual construction, design, and development phase. Page 9, in regards to basis of approval, yes, available services, we're there, we have everything. Environmental impacts, there are no environmental impacts because the site has been fully developed. More or less, it's 100% impervious. So we comply with the environmental considerations. On page 11, neighborhood compatibility. When compared to what is on the books, this presents little, if any, neighborhood compatibility impacts. The use, the fire station and emergency center use generates a lower trip generation rate. You have less frequent trips in and out. Certainly it doesn't conform to any type of peak hour loading. So from a traffic perspective, also given the location and how the uses that the people that go into the site are not traveling through a residential district, they're more or less pushed up front towards Estero Boulevard, so there's no real through traffic impacts. So the property is compatible, and then also we do have standard code buffering. And then as stated before, environmental impacts, none. In regard to any potential damages or nuisances from the use, I can't think of any damages or nuisances stemming from this type of use. And then finally, again, back on traffic and transportation systems, there are really no major impacts, especially when compared to the existing uses by right. So with that in mind, I'm available to address any questions that you have.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Vice Chair Jane Plummer has arrived. We're happy to have her. Any questions? Don, you have any questions?
Questions, thank you.
Pat, anything from you?
No questions, I'll just have a few comments.
Okay. Jane, any questions? Jim?
No question.
Doug?
No questions.
Scott?
No questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
And this is just probably more for for the public, then there was talk at in the past year or two that the front end of this parcel would be separate development, and the fire department would have the back end, but the entire parcel's being rezoned institutional.
Yes.
So if there was some other commercial activity that were to come in here at some future date, they would have to come in and amend the CPD, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is there a timeline?
Chief Martin?
I'm asking you the questions that I get asked. When's the new fire department getting built?
At this time,
No
due to
timeline.
the impacts of Ian, we do not have a timeline that I can share with the public at this time.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else? Stay tight, Greg, just in case. I'll open the public comment. Is there anybody who'd like to make a comment? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Pat, you had comments.
A few quick comments. Everything looks real good in this application. No concerns. Just maybe some comments for the chief. I think one of the things I mentioned is, in rebuilding, we're trying to elevate our standards on the beach, and I think if there's an opportunity, you guys, and I know this is all financial, but working with the town for any kind of common signage and wayfinding, the way I kind of see this area, it's a civic area. It feels like a civic campus to me, and I think there can be some tie-ins with landscaping, with design, with wayfinding, with signage. So I think collaboration with the town to do that would be great. Also, it would really help the public know when they're coming to Bay Oaks, or they're going to school, or they're going to town hall. There's common access, common landscaping also possibly. So I would just encourage you guys, when you move forward with the build, to coordinate with the town, and if you can, throw in some extra trees and make it look pretty. That's it.
Everyone to know how much I hate these microphones. Okay, good. At least I'm not alone. Anyone else have any comments? Any other questions for staff? Any other questions for the applicant? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the rezoning, including the findings and conclusions in the staff report on pages 3, 4, and 5?
I'll make a motion to approve the application, including the findings and other things just referenced.
I'll second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Doug, your vote?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Don? Aye. Jane?
Aye.
Jim? Scott?
Aye.
And aye, and the motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, and thank you all for your very hard work. Appreciate it. Nice to see you, Greg. Greg's been doing things here for the town as long as I have. That's a long time. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Greg. Okay, next item on the agenda is administrative agenda, item A, historic preservation discussion. Jason, do you have something to say about this? You may as well just come up here and stand for a few minutes, because
I'm open to staff's experience on our end about trying to get that up and running over the past year, but my experience has only been in the past year on
I know
this.
you're kind of put in a spot because Sarah hurt herself or something, I can't remember, isn't feeling well, so we're sorry. We hope she feels better. So I know you're kind of stuck on a spot. Let's just do it this way. Are there any questions from, and we may need to just put this off for further discussion, any questions or issues from the LPA about historic preservation? You know, I'm unclear on what our requirements are on this. I really am unclear. Does anybody have any insight? Let's.
So what is left to preserve right now.
And that's
And I hate
Yeah.
to be harsh, but I mean, is there anything still left that qualified, like the Sea Gypsy? Like, are there any buildings that actually survived the storm?
So this was one of the interesting things when I first got here and started looking into the code language that we have for it. There are two paths. There's a generally understood and accepted pathway for those structures that were could be or reasonably could be expected to be on a state or national register. Those types of structures were few and far between even a year ago. I believe the original school building was one of the few that was still on the island that you could reasonably think might get on to more than a local register. There was a second process which most of the applicants that I had seen in the past year were following, and that was more of a historical recognition rather than a designation. And that recognition could be provided for a multitude of things, including local celebrity or local history that may be really only contained within the region or on the island itself. It would be designated with a plaque with the year of the structure that was being designated, and it was very much. If I were to make my opinion, it was very much an aesthetic thing, just to sort of announce itself, but it wouldn't reasonably lead to being on a register. It wouldn't reasonably be a structure that might be put into the historic register and require more consideration if it were to be elevated for floodplain considerations. It wouldn't go through that extra, more arduous step to have it on a national register or even the state register. So what we were sort of working through right before the storm were, I believe, 3 designations, and those were for mainly older structures. It was unclear to staff at that time what exactly set them apart. A lot of what we found is that the original superstructure, what was originally built and may have been thought to be historic, had been added on to over the years. There wasn't a lot of information about the structures themselves, about how they retained any sort of historical recognition for the community or for the region. I believe there was also one for a series of fence posts that were very, very old, and there was some good documentation that came along with that showing how it had initially been constructed and was sort of an entrance to an established neighborhood and an established HOA, I believe. So that one had a little bit more historical information for us, but quite honestly, we didn't have the staff time to go really, really deep into looking into the applications themselves, and we relied mainly on the applicants themselves to bring into us what they believed was historical, in particular about their structure.
Mm-hmm.
I can phrase this. So I think it's important that we preserve our history, obviously, but I think our focus right now is our rebuild. So I guess my question is, do we want to recognize places that were there? For example, Heavenly Biscuit. So when a new place is built there, do we want to recognize that the building that used to be there was historic, or is this just, are we just chasing our tails? Mm-hmm. And so that I think is, I guess we have what's left? The Mound House?
Correct?
Well, the Cotton Buildings is gone. I mean, do we want to, do we want to do a shout out that building was here, or again, I mean, I think staff's time right now should be more focused on the rebuild. Do we come back to this in a year once we we get the rebuild going? I mean, once we're moving
I agree with you,
forward?
Scott. I think that this, I mean, maybe somebody else has another idea too, but I think that this discussion would be best if we put it off at least until the fall. Let's
I agree.
let's just put this discussion off for a while because it's almost hard to discuss right now. Anybody, Doug? I mean, Don?
Yeah, I was just going to say if there's anything we could do where there was a designated historic site, like let's say the Sea Gypsy, you know, where I think the LPA and the town might be able to complement or tip our hats to that is maybe in the rebuild, right? You know, maybe there are things that we can do for historic buildings or historic sites in the rebuild to assist with, you know, again, back to what we talked about the other day with respect to putting things back, they're a new form but similar to their historic design.
I agree. Anybody else have any comment on this? Okay, so this discussion is going to move off into the future a bit. All right, now stay put, Jason. So the next item is impact fees. Jason, you have comments on this? And I know you're on the spot. I'm just going to you because you're our staff today.
No, unfortunately, I'm way out of the loop on the impact fee discussion, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Any LPA members, Pat?
We don't have a whole lot of background in our packet. I think I'm just stating that because if there's anybody in the public listening, I've had informal discussions with some of the council folks. I think impact fees might be before us to just kind of get our temperature, where we stand on this. You know, we have to rebuild, and there's a lot of costs associated with the rebuilding, and I think no one likes to talk about impact fees and imposing taxes on individuals. But one of the things that I've discussed with some of the council folks is that impact fees are a tool used by almost every local jurisdiction.
Yep.
And impact fees, some of those impact fees we're already collecting. We have to collect it for Lee County, and we pass it through. But when it comes to impact fees overall, as a community, our impact fees are extremely low. And I think it's our responsibility to look into impact fees if it makes sense to either increase or include certain impact fees that we don't currently have. I think that's just being fiscally responsible, is to at least explore that. I could tell you that when I would support impact fees for commercial building, and we're talking typically what's new and incremental. So if someone has an existing property or had a property and they expand on it, they don't pay impact fees all over again. Typically it's on the increment of whatever they expand. And I think from a business and commercial standpoint, development entities are used to paying impact fees. It's common occurrence almost everywhere they go. I don't think that affects their build or no build decision. I think they factor in the impact fees as a development cost and work it in through their pro forma. I think we need to be conscious also that we don't want any impact fees that will stifle redevelopment. So those are my 2 cents. I think it's something we should look at where we wind up. I think ultimately we need to get a lot more in-depth analysis on this and then make a recommendation.
Anyone else have any comments on this? Don?
Yeah, I just kind of echo what Pat said, and I think in, you know, a new and different use. In other words, if there's a site that was, you know, a campground and it becomes a major development, you know, that's a different type of use, significant opportunity. And again, I think I work with a lot of developers, and they certainly look at that in their cost of development. I think we have to be careful. Again, we don't want to stymie development because our impact fees go out of whack, but if ours are lower than surrounding, you know, or other coastal communities, then I think we look to become on par, and it'll help the town rebuild.
So I have a question for you guys. So because you work in this field, and you too, Doug, well, maybe all of you, Jane, you too. I last night, for whatever reason, I found myself looking at real estate for sale on Fort Myers Beach, and the average price, I'd say, is $3.5 million. Right now, 3.499 seems to be like a very, very popular price tag. And so I wonder what kind of a fee could stymie somebody's efforts who's got that kind of money. And the commercial properties are significantly more. So what would that be? I mean, is a certain percentage? It just seems to me that when you're at this threshold, it's not like what would impact me and the rebuild of my house. It's something significantly more.
Right. I think it's, especially with the developers, and I'm in the utility business, I think a lot of them, people come to us because of impact fees. In other words, if there's a large impact fee to connect to water and sewer, and they have the option to do an on-site, they're looking at that and balancing it. We don't have that here, so I don't think it's that. But I think at the end of the day, if you're building a hotel, if you're building some sort of a business that's got a cash flow, you do a 20-year discounted cash flow on it. You say, I'm paying $3.5 million for the property. I've got X dollars to construct. I've got X dollars. And construction is really impact fees is in that. So at the end of the day, it's all inputs to their model. They're all different,
Sure.
right? It depends on the business. If you're building a restaurant, it's not going to pencil out. If you're building a hotel at $350, $400 a night, it starts to help.
And I think what was touched upon is it depends on the use. Restaurants, when it comes to per seat impact fees and other, if they're looking at getting a liquor license, all that stuff, the costs are extremely high. So again, if we want to encourage our local businesses to stay here and redevelop, we got to be careful with that. And I don't think I favor any kind of additional residential impact fee, but perfect example is in Collier County. Right now, the average impact fee for a single family home is close to $30,000.
For a brand new home.
Yeah. So people are still going to Collier County,
Sure.
but you have to look at the kind of community you're building and who you're attracting and who can live there and who can't live there. And, we're talking about affordability, and that definitely plays into affordability. So those are kind of the we have to look at. I think also from the standpoint of when you impose an impact fee, there's got to be a rational nexus, and you've got to do a study as to how you came up with your impact fees, what your costs are, what your capital improvement needs are.
Just
Okay.
throw it against the wall.
But I think, again, it's got to be a fair impact fee. You don't want to get challenged either as a community for what you're imposing.
I would hate
Chair.
to throw in the mom and pop again discussion, but I think we should go easy on the people like myself and like Madeline that are trying to rebuild their business and not punish us for an impact fee when we're trying to rebuild and be part of the community. Because again, if there's huge impact fees, it's going to be, we're going to have to make a decision. And again, I don't want to see empty lots and 254 unit hotels here. So I think there should be some consideration. Now, I don't mind paying an impact fee, but it's going to be tough.
Doug, you have any comment?
Yeah, I was probably building on what Patrick said, but I think impact fees should be rational. In other words, there's a reason for impact fees. Folks have paid for sewer systems and water systems, and now, other people come and develop, and they get the benefit of those systems that have already been built that other people paid for. They should contribute to that, their fair share. But I think you can offer incentives, to let's say the mom and pop or something. You could say, well, we're going to, for various reasons, because to set our policy, we could make adjustments to the impact fee. But I think you need you need a financial analysis to really tell you, and I think you probably collect impact fees for Lee County and they set their own, but it should be based on a rational, there's a reason for impact fees. It's a financial necessity for communities to build the capital infrastructure that they need. And we should have whatever our impact fees are, they should be based on some rational analysis. Once you have that, then you could make policy decisions on, hey, we want to encourage a small boutique hotel. We're going to give them a discount on their impact fee or something like that. But that's a policy decision. But the impact fee itself should be based on a rational financial analysis. You got bonds, you got debts you have to pay. People have paid for infrastructure like sewer systems. Like Captiva wants to have a sewer system. They want the sewage to go to Sanibel. Well, they're going to have to pay. Sanibel built the wastewater treatment plant. The people on Sanibel paid for it. And they can't just have that capacity without contributing something to it. And that's what an impact fee is.
I agree. I'm not saying that the mom and pops shouldn't have an impact fee. Because whatever we develop is going to have an impact. But I think we should be incentivized.
I think that was a good point that Doug made.
Right.
Yeah. So you establish it from a rational, logical point of view, and then make a policy to.
So I don't want to not pay an impact fee.
Sure.
But I think the impact should be less if we're rebuilding. If that makes sense.
Impact fee for Sea Gypsy would be, you had an established, you did pay for.
Right.
You've paid for the sewer system for the capacity used yesterday, today, before the storm. Going forward, if you said, well, I'm going to double the size of the Sea Gypsy for whatever reason, let's say
So
you
it would
could.
be incremental.
Yeah,
like-
so you
like
pay
Pat said.
you might pay an incremental, and then we could, back to policies, we could offer an incentive to the Sea Gypsy to say, you can pay that incremental impact fee over some period of time. I don't know, maybe in your property taxes or through some annual assessment or something. I don't know what the law says, but at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't know what the legal ramifications
Yeah,
are, but
right.
there should be some incentive for the smaller boutique hotels to get back on their feet.
Sure.
The,
Jane? Sorry, Pat.
there are firms that specialize in doing impact fee analyses, and that's all they do. They do it throughout the country, throughout the state, and it's one of our requirements. You can't just arbitrarily impose an impact fee without a proper study done. So I think, I don't know how much discussion we need to have today, but my thought would be, personally, I would support the town manager having the discussion with council as to, do we want to look into a consultant? Do we want to look into this issue? I certainly don't have that expertise, but I think it's worth looking into.
I agree. Anyone disagree with that? Okay. Jane? Here. Pat, you can use that.
Yeah. So my only thoughts are that, we have other municipalities around us. None of them were hit quite as hard as we were. But I do think that across the board, we should be working with all of those municipalities on several avenues: basic fees, impact fees, build back permits, what our packages should involve for our emergency situation to make things move quicker. I think there's a whole list of things that we could get the mayors together, the building chiefs of each community together, and try to go across the board to see how we can help each other, as opposed to stop, wait, we got to add one more fee and it's going to change next week. And I think that's the crazy thing for most people here, is that they get started on a plan and then the plan changes, so you got to go back and do the plan again. I just think if we worked with other municipalities who aren't under such stress that we are, maybe we could pull from their information and move quicker forward.
Jim, you have any comment?
I would just reiterate what the other council members have said, and that is there needs to be a nexus between the fee and the service provided, and if that requires a consultant or a study, then we should ask council or the town manager to do that, and that reiterate what Jane had to say is that it would be of interest to see what our surrounding communities are charging and to see if there's some benefit to having some coordination between the different towns and the fees that they charge.
Okay, so our recommendation is going to be that the town council and the town manager continue to pursue a consultant or whomever is necessary to pursue impact fees and establish policies to protect or give incentive or create some policy for existing businesses looking to rebuild, especially what we'll call them boutique hotels and businesses, right? Okay. Next item for discussion are commercial design standards. Jason, I know you're going to be on the spot here, but you know what I'm wondering was there was some discussion about John, are you listening? So is there some bill pending in the legislature that's going to circumvent municipalities from taking or creating designs, architectural review boards or things like this?
Yes. At last year's legislative session, the legislature adopted a state statute that significantly preempted local government's abilities to develop and institute architectural standards for primarily residential development. I'd have to go back and take a look at the statute to see whether or not it also includes commercial, and I think that's part of the reason why the focus of the conversation is more along the lines of the commercial development. There are some limits on the ability of local governments to be able to institute those types of standards at this point in time. The exact extent,
Our packet specifically refers to non-residential.
Correct.
Okay.
That's why I'm emphasizing that the packet does in fact say non-residential, because my recollection off the top of my head is that the state statute is primarily designed to restrict local government's ability to regulate architectural standards as they related to residential development.
Okay. So let's begin this discussion. Jane, you have any comments right off the bat? If it doesn't, throw it against the wall.
I think it works. My only thing about creating standards is that we have, if we just take a step back and say what we had in our plan before was residential standards, and those residential standards were a cute little cottage with a big front porch and the driveway to the side or the back to get into your garage so the garage didn't face the street. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen any of those built. So I'm thinking that, maybe we allow the commercial to bring us their plan and have certain criteria we would like to have as a part of it, but not design their buildings so that everything looks the same. I mean, we don't want that. But we could have design criteria as far as, basic standards, but we don't want to name the box, put a picture on the box and say, this is what every box has to look like. Because I think that takes out so much of what builds the character.
Yeah, I'd like to add, as I look over the standard that was in our package, I see a lot of very prescriptive, 7 feet minimum, 2 3/4 inch, which I think is probably too prescriptive. And maybe there should be guidelines or policies, but then individual projects can be looked at individually, because we don't want to, I'm afraid this is, if you followed all these rules, you'd kind of have like a Celebration Disneyland kind of thing, because everything's going to look so similar that we might not, the result may be something we're not as happy with as we thought we would be. Yeah.
And yet these have been in here since 1999, and the town doesn't look that way. But you know
Yeah,
what?
just-
Now it may very well. You've got a point, Pat.
So I think what we've got in our packet is what's existing, and I think a lot of what's existing is good. I think just moving forward, I don't think doing nothing is an option. I think we need to be proactive. And having worked on some of these before, I think there's a difference between requirements and guidelines. And I think you still have to set that vision, though, and kind of allow people to think of what things could look like. And one of the things that a lot of our, I think our consultant, maybe the Cordino Group and other folks typically say is, if there's something you want, okay, make it prescriptive. If there's something that is optional, yes, create a guideline. But if there are certain things that we want to encourage and that we want, and I'm not sure what that is, if we, for example, we have build two lines versus setbacks. Okay, I think the intent with the build two lines is to create activity near the public realm, the street. And if that's something we want, that's why you impose a build two line versus a setback. So again, I would just say that I think there's room for this discussion, and we have options of guidelines, prescriptive requirements. We do have some good stuff in our code that hasn't been utilized too much because we haven't had a ton of redevelopment, but it's coming. So I think we're going to see this applied, but I think we do need to maybe revisit this a little broader.
And from a staff perspective, and thank you so much for bringing up the build two lines. Specifically, right now, we've run into a conflict when you have a property that is on a corner lot specifically, because staff doesn't have the language to differentiate between a lot that has 2 frontages on roads, or even certain lots that have 3 frontages on roads. So how would you want to apply build back policy? We can obviously look at a main road if it's on Estero, for instance, and make a determination. Hey, that's where the intent of the build two line was to be, but there's a gap between perhaps what the intent was and how it's applied. And that was one of the concerns that we had on a very close to pre-storm proposed site plan about how you apply those build two lines specifically for a lot that sits on 3 frontages. So we almost had to make a determination, well, we're going to consider this to be a rear and therefore not part of the build two line, because otherwise you would end up with a structure that realistically had three frontages within 5 to 10 feet of the front property line, and it's like, well, that encourages you only to take access from one, and that other side is adjacent to an already developed site. So it creates a lot of problems for staff and for designers in those instances. Also, one thing that I'll bring up that staff runs into quite frequently is the application of see-through windows on these buildings. Obviously, windows are great. They would be great on the thoroughfare where everybody sort of interacts with that building or sees the building itself. But there's a lot of situations that pop up, particularly with bathrooms. I don't think anybody realistically wants a see-through window into a bathroom, but we've run across.
Well, you know.
Everybody's in their own thing. I'm not here to second guess them on that thing. But it is an interesting scenario where you have to talk with a designer or an architect and explain to them our code doesn't have any really, doesn't have a loophole for you. The code says you shall have windows in your restroom, and trying to figure out how to deal with that because the code is unclear or doesn't anticipate that your bathroom may be the last portion that's kind of stuffed into a building, and that happens to be an area that is visible to the public, in which our code says if you're visible from a parking area, for instance, you still have to have these windows, or it's considered to be a primary frontage, therefore having to have the requirements of windows. It also came up with a restaurant build pre-storm that I won't get into, but this is one of the things that is, I believe, incomplete, or at least wasn't considered when we put in those requirements like windows.
A question, Jason. Are you guys, do you guys have like an ongoing list that you keep of applicants come in, here's a hiccup, here's something that we'd like to change as part of the LDC, and maybe if you guys came back to us and say, we like these are problematic, we'd like to explore that, then we can maybe give you some guidance, and then you guys can go in and do some quick LDC amendments, bring that back to us, and we can correct some of these issues like the bathroom.
I think we've got a that we could probably put to 5 or 10 of our biggest hiccups that we run into on a regular basis.
Excellent. That would be productive, because talking about the windows, the intent of the windows was to do window shopping, especially in this downtown zone where everything is to that build to line, and so it was that but turtle glass. When the windows are tinted to protect the turtles, the windows effectively become mirrors because they're so dark during the day that you do not have that transparency that we anticipated in this plan. Okay, I think that'd be a great suggestion. Anybody else have any comments on this? Jim?
Yeah, I think these commercial design standards need to be looked at in conjunction with the comp plan, and the fact that if we have different commercial nodes going down Estero and then Times Square, that we need to have enough flexibility here that each of these nodes could be developed differently so that they don't all look similar.
Pat, I keep the handout that you gave us at that meeting because I instantly recoil at the idea of a planned community. I just don't like it. I think it's the antithesis of Fort Myers Beach. But you said something in that meeting that has stuck with me, and it is the organic nature of that community. So your plan may be every building has shutters, and it may sound like it's going to be very Stepfordy, very contrived, but ultimately there are enough variations that what you really are doing is setting a standard. You're setting a standard that this is the aesthetic that we hope to accomplish, and so I've rethought how I feel about that, and I think that. One of the things that the town, and Jane will remember this, back in the olden days, I don't think we went far enough with design standards. Well, I was there with you, honey. So I don't think we went far enough with this, and I don't think we went far enough with telling people what we wanted, of drawing them the picture of what we wanted, and I think that's really critical to do right now. And I'm hoping that maybe we spend an entire meeting just kind of visualizing that, because if we don't, what we're going to end up doing is making them a checklist of what they can't do, or what prescriptive measures, like Doug brought up, that ultimately doesn't get us where we want to be. So, Don?
And to say, I mean, I think probably, I don't want to use the word enforcement, but just utilizing those standards. I mean, we have these here. If you told me this, this is what Fort Myers Beach was set up to be in 1999.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a building here that's
No,
been built
yeah.
since '99 that looks anything
Yeah.
like these. So I think the other thing is, adopt a standard and actually utilize it, right? And sort of keep it moving. We did. I think Pat mentioned it. I was pleased with the redevelopment of the medical center site down here
Yes.
for Interiors Unlimited, I think. But that building looks nothing like these, right? It's a very modern looking, it's different. It's different than the way I think of Fort Myers Beach. I happen to love it. I think it's really cool. It just doesn't say Fort Myers Beach to me.
Yeah.
And so, we've already kind of went down that path with some of those.
I think the key thing with our old standards were that nobody came in and tore down a building and rebuilt it.
Yep.
So you had the funky thing that was there, and you had to make it into what you needed it to be for your business. And so it was like add a second story, reshape something, but they didn't tear down. So that's why we don't know what these design standards would look like, because nobody had to do that. Now we have an opportunity to maybe have a path of vision, but once again, I don't want it to all look the same.
I'll tell you where you can see this a little bit is Old St. Carlos Boulevard. You can see it in John Richard's properties from Zushi down to, that's where you can see what this, an idea of this. It's not perfect, but probably the biggest effort towards accomplishing this.
Mhm.
Pat?
Yeah, I think we're going to get some projects coming in as planned developments, and they're going to be proposing a certain aesthetic, a certain design. I think we just need to explore that with the applicants, and those will set the tone. I think those will be catalyst projects and will influence what other smaller property owners do. Again, I think we want it to be a little eclectic. I agree. We don't want it to be all the same thing. And, one of the things that I tell young planners and designers coming out of school is, you gotta have a bit of a sense of humor and understand that you're not going to master plan in this, and you're just not going to, you're not going to be the puppet master, where things evolve over time and incrementally. And I just tell people, look, we're overall in Florida, we're brand new. If you look at
Scheme of things.
anybody who's traveled to Europe, you kind of realize that we're brand new here. But even if you compare it to us to Key West, and I lived a few years in Key West, and I think the average home has 7 additions or 7 modifications to it. So that town has evolved over time, and the way it looks today, and it looks like it's old historical, it hasn't been static. Things evolve and things take time. So I think we just need to keep that in mind of, look, it's going to redevelop, but it's also going to change, and this is not going to be static.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments on this? All right, we'll move on to the parallelogram shaped lot design. Scott, you brought this forward, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember why. I struggled with this.
So the genesis of this was there are over 150 lots on our island
148.
that are parallelograms, and I was approached by team members at Homebound who are here, and they're going to discuss this further, but want to get away so every parallelogram lot is not coming before us asking for a variance, because it's going to be a couple feet, and if you just do the average geometry, and they can explain this a lot better, but I want it to this rebuild to be fast, efficient, and not harmful. And I think these guys have a great presentation, and staff should consider this so we can do administrative variances instead of bogging us down at the LPA and with the town council. Save money and time.
and make our rebuild more efficient.
Okay, I had no idea we were going to have a presentation here. Does anybody object to this? Okay. I'm just going to ask you to keep it short because there's several people here today who have time constraints.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the LPA. My name is Samir Malvia.
Good morning, Samir.
I'm General Manager of Homebound, Florida. I'm with my colleague Drew Whiting, at Art and House Art. I think I met several of you, but Homebound is a national builder that operates in 6 major metros across the U.S. We have a division that is purely focused on rebuilding homes after natural disasters. We recently launched our operations in Southwest Florida and are currently working with approximately 50 customers in Fort Myers Beach.
50.
We're appearing before you to ask for an administrative variance for the setbacks on the 150 or so parallelogram-shaped lots on the island. These lots are located on Fairweather, Miramar, among other streets. Given the odd shapes of these lots, the recently announced setbacks, and the resulting buildable footprint, we believe that the majority of these homeowners will likely be forced to rebuild custom homes on these lots. Needless to say, that's going to be a more expensive and time-intensive process that may prevent some of these folks from rebuilding at all, and buyers coming in from potentially purchasing these lots. Alternatively, these homeowners may end up applying for individual variances, which will take up a significant amount of time of the LPA's time and resources.
Sure.
My colleague Drew will walk you through more specifics of the proposal. It's only the first page. You can read the rest of it potentially at your leisure. I'll walk you through the specifics of our proposal, but in summary, we're seeking an administrative variance for the setbacks, which will allow A, homeowners to build back more efficiently, bring back the tax base sooner, and B, reduce the administrative burden of 100+ individual variance applications to the LPA. Thanks.
Good morning.
So following up on what Samir,
Will you say your name for the
oh,
record?
sorry, Drew Whiting, also with Homebound.
Thank you, Drew.
So following up on what Samir was just getting into, our proposal is basically looking for some adjustment to both the front and rear setbacks, as well as the side setbacks. So starting with the front and rear setbacks, if you flip to the diagrams towards the rear, we've basically outlined these lots on several of the streets that we're recognizing. The first piece you're seeing is a green lot that would basically be a lot of the same dimensions rectangularly to show what the buildable area would be with the setbacks of 7.5 feet on the sides, 20 in the rear, and 25 in the front. And then down below in red, you're seeing that same lot with the skewed parallelogram shape and how much more limited that shape becomes. In the front and rear, you end up getting a significant amount of triangular shape that's wasted in the front and back because we're not building parallelogram-shaped houses. So you kind of end up with a much more constrained rectangle that you can work within inside of that. So for the front and rear, we're suggesting that we still use that same 25-foot front setback and 20-foot rear setback, but rotate the setback line, so maybe it would be referenced as a build-to line in this situation, at the center point so that it's then perpendicular to your side setbacks or your side property lines to kind of square out the shape that you're working within. And if we go back to page 2, we presented some photos from Fairweather Lane in particular that kind of demonstrates the sawtooth look that you get on the street front from this shape. It's already an existing view that you would see on these or on these streets anyways. But something that we're just kind of formalizing that makes sense for this. When it comes to the side setbacks, again, you're considering a 50-foot lot with 7.5-foot setbacks. Typically, you see a 35-foot width to build within. On these parallelogram-shaped lots, you again get constrained by several more feet depending on the severity of the angle. So we've provided 2 options that we think work pretty well here. Initially, we were looking at reducing that down to maintaining the 15% lot width, or but down to 6 feet as a maximum rather than 7.5 feet to give a little more flexibility for these lots. But in speaking with Pat via email, he suggested looking for additional historical precedent on what we can do with the side setbacks, knowing that 7.5 is kind of a strict line, side setback maximum. So we did a little more research and looked for another alternative. and we found Ordinance 2104 from June 10th of 2021, which basically was removing a portion from the code, allowing administrative setback variances for these smaller lots down to a 40-foot width by 75-foot depth. That basically allowed the reduction of side setbacks to 10% of lot width or a 5-foot minimum or maximum, whichever is greater. So we're suggesting a similar reference point there that we think makes sense. I think the change at the time with the ordinance was removing that from the code, knowing that you're seeing a lot more of these on a case-by-case basis at that point because you're not building all of these or rebuilding all of these parallelogram shaped lots at one time. But it might make sense to kind of reincorporate that now that we're building roughly 150 of these lots kind of over a shorter period of time. And that's all.
That's very good. Thank you. Anybody have questions? Anybody have comments?
To take action on this, we would have to have this come through as a hearing, correct?
Yes, we would.
Yeah.
Jason, what's your opinion? Because he's our guy.
So I
Is
looked
this
at.
one of your top 10 issues?
I can't say it's breached the top 10 yet, but
Okay.
rebuild
Sounds like
rebuild
it's about
is
to.
It, so I think I have a couple questions, and maybe they could be deemed as concerns. So I think my first question would be: we're talking about allowing an additional protrusion of the main structure to create a house that is centered on the lot and going to be fairly perpendicular to the parallelograms lines. I get the reasoning for wanting to do it. Now my question becomes, aren't we basically saying that the 6-foot base triangle that is created creates additional building space for these particular lots? And then I question immediately, we have some number of, perhaps not 150, but we have some number of roughly triangular lots. We also have some amount of pentagonal or hectagonal 5 or 6 faceted lots, which are also somewhat difficult to deal with. If you wanted to stick everything into a box and say these are the types of lots that we would consider for a by right, or excuse me, to consider for an administrative variance, you're leaving a lot of leeway with staff to determine what's reasonable or not, and whether or not a 5-faceted lot is important to deal with and give additional protrusion space as you would a parallelogram lot. So I'm just trying to see how, I'm trying to envision how it would look when I go to apply that, and what additional work I'm going to need to do to say, well, this lot requires a triangle with a base of 5 feet, this one requires one with 6 feet, and do all of those fit into the same administrative variance box that we're talking about here? So those would be my first initial reactions to it. I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea. I just think there are also a smaller number of lots that could take advantage of this and maybe save full variance time and effort and money, that we should also consider if we're going to do this, make sure that those lots, like triangular lots, for instance, also find their way into something like this.
Consider. Pat? Oh, sorry, Jane.
I was just going to say that, in looking at this, I mean, when you have 37 of these lots on one street, I would think it would, at some point, when they start building, look very normal to have a smaller setback, and everybody would appreciate that because they are in this neighborhood of these lots. But, and I mean, it's not like, I mean, there's only one area that is on Estero Boulevard that only has 4, but the rest of them have big numbers of these. And so I think doing something like that, like this, sounds like it's for very specific areas, and I think that those areas will look absolutely normal when they're done. So I don't think that it would be a bad thing for the island, and I do think it would clear up a lot of, issues with building, because, I mean, you can see the differences in these packages of how much they lose in their building, and that's whole-size rooms almost in some places. I do like the fact that they take the middle of the lot to make their setbacks. And I do think, I live on Fairweather, and I never really looked at how those houses are angled, because
I
they all
always
look
liked
normal.
it.
Because
Yeah.
they are I mean, that
what you're
has
used to.
become the normal. But yeah, I think this is a great idea to solve issues. It's kind of like, why don't we solve the issues with all the vacated lots behind people's houses? We're gonna have to do that too, sooner or later, on all those streets where they've had the seawall built in and they have this number of feet between the seawall and their property. We should vacate all that stuff now and make it simple, instead of all those variances.
Pat?
I like what's being proposed. Just so we clarify, the setbacks, essentially, if you look at the midpoint of the lot, when you're looking at the width, stays the same. So what we're talking about is just a slight encroachment to one side, but whatever they would gain on that side, it's reduced on the other side. So we're not talking about a bigger box. So I like this idea. I think, it facilitates redevelopment. I think especially if people are going to be looking at quicker, more efficient building systems, modular homes or anything like that. Typical box tends to be a rectangle, so people don't have to get custom designs to try to maximize their footprint. The one thing, and I did talk to the presenters today, there were some suggestions about the side setbacks being reduced, and one of the things that I brought up with them is 7.5 is kind of a norm, and we set it back to 7.5, and I don't want to also create where we reduce a setback and now you've got an existing home that wasn't destroyed, and they say my neighbor was at 7.5 before, and now blanketly we've kind of approved 6 feet or 5 feet or whatever. I think that there's still room for that to be a regular variance if they want to come in and ask for it. So I would just caution to be cognizant of that and protect those existing homeowners. But encroaching a little bit into the rear or the front, I see no problem with that. I think it maintains the intent. I think we could do it in such a way where staff looks at it, you set some parameters, and you that leeway and what you guys can make your decision on, you can kind of quantify. So it's not one of those where you feel uncomfortable making that decision. The other thing when it comes to side setbacks, I've always thought that providing relief for people to have kind of a minimum sized house is important. We talked about that when we talked about the corner lots. And I think if we're looking at lots 40 feet or under, 7.5 feet on each side kind of makes it where you've got a house that's less than 30 feet wide. And to me, a house less than 30 feet wide starts feeling like,
The skinny house.
yeah, more shotgun house, old-fashioned shotgun house, or like a townhome. And I like this idea of providing enough flexibility for people to have 30 feet. I think what I asked the guys at Homebound was, when it comes to 40-foot lots, do we have a lot of those? And is that a major issue? And I think the answer probably isn't. So I think right now what they're proposing to me feels like a good solution that we need to direct staff to explore. And I think, Jason, if you guys run into either triangular lots or what was the I think I was getting a geometry lesson. Pentagonal. So, but if we have all these other lots that are problematic, and we could have like an umbrella solution where we're not really diminishing the neighbor's existing expectations or rights, I think I'd be open to that. And very small lots, like a 40-foot lot. Also, if there's anything that you think could be standardized to help out, I'd like to see that discussion.
Does anyone disagree? I think it's a discussion worth pursuing, and appreciate
Absolutely.
very much you bringing this information to us. You made it very clear.
And doing the homework.
Thanks for the drawing.
Yeah, we like drawings.
Jim, did you have something?
I don't have a problem with the midline on the front and rear yard. I think it's a good solution. But as I brought up, I think we've already got a standard at 7.5 feet on the side yard setbacks, and that if someone has a unique situation where it's less than 30 feet or they have a design, they still have the opportunity to go through the variance process. So I have a little bit of a problem deviating from the 7.5 feet.
Yeah. Yeah. Doug, did you want to say something?
Just the same comment. I think it's, everything looks okay to me except the reference to like a 5-foot setback.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Okay,
I
so,
think that's a good idea to, you know, if a house could only be 30 feet, then maybe another side note of maybe the side setbacks could be at 10% or whatever. That could be a quick solution for houses that would only fit on the lot and be 30 feet.
I think what would be great would be for if you guys could work with our staff to bring back for hearing so that we could actually do something with this and forward it on to the town council. Jason, good? And if you feel like you need to include the rest of the geometric forms you mentioned, that would be okay too. So, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Scott, thanks for bringing that forward. Next item is LPA members' items and reports. Scott, do you have anything?
None.
How about you, Doug?
They do not.
And you, Jim?
No report.
Jane?
I just have a question. Jason, I don't know if you have this answer at all. I've had a lot of people ask me what's going on with Bay Oaks and the school. Do we have any updates on those? Have we put a contract in place for Bay Oaks to start?
Staff level, I believe that's probably a question for the town manager himself. I believe he's been in the mix on that.
Do you have any updates on that?
Yeah, on the school front, there's been a ad hoc committee formed made up of residents, parents, vice mayor, and we are in discussion with the school district. It looks like there are different options, but I think it'll go to a vote where the mid-ground option seems to be the favored one, which means that they would be bringing the school back to the island. It wouldn't be a complete rebuild for 150 to 200 kids, but it would be kind of an interim position where as the enrollment goes up, if we can meet certain goals, that school could be expanded over time. So I think we feel that there's a favorable solution. We're working out some of the details. The district would like something a little more formal in the form of MOU or memorandum of understanding or interlocal agreement. So we're discussing the details right now, but we're hoping that within a month this goes back to the district board and that they make a decision. Meanwhile, the good thing is they are moving forward with the remediation, which is should be done shortly, and they're not waiting for that final decision to start looking for a contractor for the rebuild. So they're progressing. So
Excellent.
Good
all
to
positive
know.
things.
Yay.
While I've got the mic, also when it comes to the fields at Bay Oaks, Little League has reached out to some of our pro teams that come down here for the winter, and they've been favorable in wanting to help us out, and they've asked us to put a little wish list together that we are going to present to them, and we're hoping that we can get some supplies, equipment, some assistance in rebuilding our fields.
Yay. Great source.
Bravo.
Great reach
Good.
out.
Jane, any other items? Pat, any other items? Don, any items?
No items, thank you.
Okay. My items have pertained to the items for next month's agenda, so I'll just wait for that. LPA attorney, Mr. Herron, anything?
Why did we put him at the back of the bus? Is there a
Because he's
reason?
been bad.
Okay,
No.
there you go.
One item very briefly to follow up on LPA member Vanessa's comment. Playing phone tag late Friday, received a call from the school board legal department to see if we can start or get a copy of the ILA that I believe that they're already starting to work on with regard to the school. So hopefully we'll have something in the very near future to bring forward.
ILA
And
equals interlocal
interlocal agreement, yes, that is correct. As I had mentioned to during the school board prior town council meeting about this issue, we need to look at the existing ILAs regarding what was being proposed to redevelop Bay Oaks campus prior to the storm and make sure that they are consistent with each other and how we're going to deal with those issues. So there's a certain level of integration that needs to take place that I'll discuss with the Lee County School Board staff when I speak to them, hopefully this afternoon. And then on a personal note, just want to give a shout out if my wife is watching that I love her dearly and I will spend another 31 years with her gladly.
Oh, very
Huge.
nice, John.
Congratulations.
Very nice. I'm
So-
sure you're going to get points for that.
Yes. Does she usually watch?
Sometimes. she, yeah. She used to make fun of me.
Oh.
Frankly, when I would watch
Other municipalities.
other municipalities, like, what are you doing watching that on vacation or whatever? And so now, that's she's taken.
I've been made fun of that
yeah.
too.
Me too.
So,
Yeah.
So do
Yes,
you know
ma'am.
anything about has there been a contract signed for Bay Oaks?
A contract I believe has been awarded and signed to begin the process of trying to rehab to ultimately put it in a situation or position where it can be considered as a temporary town hall. I think that's the goal, but I defer to the town manager on the scope, and but I do believe the contract has already been entered into.
Great. Super.
Anything
Thank you,
else?
John.
Moving forward.
And happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Patrick.
If you guys can just indulge me 2 seconds, I'll get on my soapbox here. I just want to relay that we've had amazing support for the school, and I think every resident that has been supportive of the school. But also on social media and other platforms, I've seen some comments about people questioning how many kids we have at the school and why spend that money. And I would just welcome anybody that's got concerns to reach out to me or other folks. I think what's important is some of the numbers right now are skewed because of the hurricane and COVID and all these things. And I think above all, what's important is and I know some people don't have kids anymore that live here, but when we build a true community, a school is part of building a community. And the fabric that we want, the reason why we love this beach, this is an essential component to that reason why we love this beach so much. We need a school, we need children, we need families to want to move here.
Absolutely.
You know,
I will echo that as well. I've got grandkids, and I've got no skin in this game, but this community has to have a school in order to move forward. And my wife and I are doing everything we can to make sure that this school keeps going.
Doug, you're leaning in.
I would agree completely, and I know last time we met I reminisced about when I lived on Longboat Key. Well, when I lived on Longboat Key, my youngest son was in the 3rd grade, and he got on a bus and went for miles into town to a school because there's no schools on Longboat Key, right? And I think it really, if we like we said, we want Fort Myers Beach as a community, not just a destination. And I agree, you have to have a school.
You know, again, back in the olden days, there was a resident here. His name was Harry Gottlieb, and he was just and his wife Jean. He was an extraordinary person, and at the time, this was like super early on in the town. I mean, really early on in the town. The fight was over the pool, whether or not we would have a pool. And there had been a straw ballot on the pool, and the straw ballot was, no, we don't want the pool. Well, then there was a community meeting, and I wasn't in support of the pool. I thought, because I grew up swimming in the Gulf, I thought, why do you need a pool? Harry Gottlieb got up in this meeting, and it was one of those pivotal moments, and I can remember it like it was yesterday, and it's so relative now to just what you said. He said, Anita, I'm only going to talk to you. And he said, you have to think about the kind of community you want Fort Myers Beach to be 50 years from now. And if you want families to live in this town, you have to provide for them. And this pool will be a place where kids will come to learn to swim. There will be activities around it and whatever. And I changed my whole point of view based on his comment. And now it's not just about the pool. It's about the school. It's about churches. It's about a bank. It's about a shopping place, a grocery store. It's about what things make a town a town. And you're absolutely right in your comment there, Patrick. I agree with you completely. And if Harry were sitting here in this room, he would stand up and say the same thing. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that. Next item is community development items and reports. Jason, I'm going to let you off the hook on that one because I don't want to ask you for any more than you've already stood in for, and thank you for that. Items for next month's agenda. Instead of next month, could I just talk about our next meeting? So our next meeting is Monday at 1 o'clock. It's a
Public
joint.
opinion.
What?
Are they leaving and they had public opinion?
No.
No? Okay.
Next meeting is a joint session with the town council and our consultant, Eddie Ng. I've been asked to write the agenda, and in doing so, I've been listening to our joint work session of last week. But what I wanted to ask you all today was, what are the key points you feel that you want to address with the consultant? What I know for sure is we want to address the nodes, and Bill Veach had brought up that one of the nodes, and I can't remember exactly where, that was in the plan. The council had early on asked for it to be pulled out. It was still there. I know that Patrick, you brought up the Seminole Women's Club, that triangle, that one was in question. So I know we want to talk about that and identify that, but is there anything else specifically? Doug, you're leaning in?
Yeah, well, I think there was a sort of a consensus from everybody that said something on density.
Yes.
And the FAR, floor area ratio, seemed, some of the numbers in the draft plan seemed pretty out of line with our vision for Fort Myers Beach.
Agreed.
As a consensus.
Agreed. Scott?
I concur with that. I think I think the node that's in question is the Publix node.
The public. Was that the one that Bill was talking about? I couldn't
Yeah,
remember.
so
Okay.
Doug and I both live on Sable, and we just don't see Sable as a commercial development. So I think we need to drill down and set the boundaries. And we also talked about the car wash area, laundromat
which is
area, Lahaina, where that is kind of etch-a-sketch gone. And I think we can develop that. And I think we need to concentrate on the height in the different nodes, because I think he had it higher where Red Coconut was and lower down here, and I really want to have a discussion about it increasing as we go downtown.
Yeah.
So I think we need to absolutely talk about FAR, but we also need to talk about height as well.
So maybe height is its own topic.
Yep.
Right, I agree.
I think
Okay.
with the note, just to also add that I think there was consensus on looking to add the Moss Marine area because it just makes sense to be part of that node. And then, I went back and I thought a bit of our discussion and I was listening to some of the comments and I agree we have a mechanism right now in our comp plan that allows development to come forward and ask for either more lodging units or more height. So we do have that flexibility, and I think people will come forward asking for that. The one thing that's still just inherently having worked with a ton of codes and this being my profession, these inconsistencies and conflicts that we have in our comp plan, I would just say that even if we don't change our allowed densities or FAR a whole lot or keep it the same, I'd really like staff to go ahead and try to clean up those inconsistencies and these different tools that we use that are in conflict, because I think that just makes it burdensome and it also confuses the public and the discussions when people come in and bring a project forward. So I think
Okay.
cleaning that up would be a priority for me.
Okay. What about the discussion of calculating the floor area ratio as we do now, ground level versus base flood?
Yeah, that was another, go ahead. That was one.
That's to me, we need to clarify that. However, if we change the calculation, we're essentially giving
Adding a floor.
more building intensity by right. So I think it's just, whatever the will of the council and is, but I think we just have to recognize that. And either we're going to calculate that way or not, but if we do say that we start, if it's parking garage underneath, it's not part of the FAR, then that just basically by right, we've augmented what people could do previously.
Yep.
Yeah.
It gives you 3 floors above parking at that
Correct.
point, right? I mean, because you still have the height requirement, so.
Correct.
and that's-
And the beauty of that is it answers the people who want the view corridor, want the air, breeze, light, all that stuff. But it also, I mean, you would have to have some little mechanical thing there on the ground level that so many square footage that you would have to allow for elevator lobby and, to walk into, to get into the elevator. And so, there would have to be a minimum size or a maximum size of elevator entrance, and then the rest would have to be all open. But that takes a lot of the, it puts cars away, and I think that's a big benefit for us all. Instead of having the building go to the ground and then have to go up.
So can anyone think of anything else, Scott?
No, I just want to, agree with Jane that, you shouldn't be penalized for parking lots. But we need to have that discussion.
Okay.
Anita,
Yes.
I think there was discussion again with Sea Gypsies or other mom and pops of some of these rules. We need to look at some kind of, just like we did with corner lots, where there's a disproportionate burden on some of these small hotels, motels, inns, where if we want to keep them and we want to look at some kind of flexibility there.
So I'm hoping that we'll be able to, because I have here on my next agenda meeting to actually try to define what the mom and pop is, what's our inventory, what was our past inventory, what's still here now, but to kind of, to define what it is. Is it just the Sea Gypsy? Is it Madeline's Place? I don't know.
Anchor in.
So is it the Anchor Inn? Right. So I think defining that will be important and identifying the existing properties.
Mermaid Tails.
So, What?
Mermaid Tails on Fairweather, 6 units.
Oh, yeah, Mermaid Tales on Fairweather, 6 units.
And like,
Well, Holiday Court, all the little hotels
Yeah, Tree's
across
old
from,
place.
which are,
Tree
those
and
properties
Dan's.
are for sale, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
there are a bunch of them.
Yeah,
La
there are a
Villa
bunch of
down here. You've got I can't remember the name of
The
it.
Gulf Manor.
Gulf
yep,
Manor.
yep.
Surf Nuts is gone, but I mean
Yeah.
that's a
So I
prime
think
example.
identifying them is gonna be really
Periwinkle.
important, so
So
we're
do
not
you
just
do you
talking-
identify them? What are you thinking? Are you identifying by lot size or by how many rooms they had?
I think all of it. I think you got to, and then identifying them like what qualifies them to be this mom and pop or boutique hotel for redevelopment.
Are they
Because-
redeveloping in the same way?
And
are
are
they
they
redeveloping
redeveloping in the same
a
way?
boutique
Sure.
hotel, or are they
Yeah.
making it a restaurant
Yeah.
or a parking
It could
lot?
be a whole discussion all
Right.
by itself. Yeah.
I mean, you got a bunch. You got the place down by London was Hummel.
By Lynn Hall?
No, down by the laundromat.
Oh, yeah.
oh, yeah.
The one that was swept
yeah,
away.
Yeah,
You-
Hideaway.
Waves?
Hideaway Village.
Oh,
Then
Hideaway
you've got
Village,
the old
yeah.
Sandy Beach. You've got
Yeah.
Myerside.
Yeah.
You've got
Quite a lot.
quite a lot. I
Well,
think I
Myerside
think
is
there's
different because it's a CBD.
yeah they have their own CPD,
Yeah.
but you'd be surprised. I mean the
How
tiki,
many there are.
the
You
tiki
know what?
right across from
Could you,
Publix.
since this is your area, you're in this box, do you think you could make a list of
Yeah.
what you, that'd be great. I think that'd be helpful for Monday.
Okay,
That'd
I
be
will
Chamber
do
have
that.
that information, maybe?
I'm sorry.
Would the chamber have that information, maybe?
The chamber probably would not. I would have to do some research, but I think that's a good.
Yeah, it'd be good
But I
just
mean,
to be
there, I
able to
mean, you
identify.
just think about it. There's Manatee Inn. There's.
Yeah.
I mean, there was.
But you're thinking about it a lot more than, I mean, you're
Sun
naming
Deck.
ones that I forgot about.
I mean-
Sun Deck, I forgot about Sun Deck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I say let Scott come up with a list because I think we all, in our minds, we all know what we mean when we say a boutique
right.
hotel.
Yeah.
yeah,
And they're neat. And I used to really, we stayed at the Tiki even though we live right
Yeah.
across the street almost. And so we know what we're talking about, but it's hard to write a
Yeah.
specification for it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Scott, can you put number of
Matanzas-
units?
Would you consider Matanzas a mom and pop boutique hotel?
It's pretty small.
It is
It's
pretty
small.
small,
I
but
mean-
is it smallness that's, I think this is just something, I agree, this is something that needs to be on there. And we'll see
Scott,
what,
put number of
Eddie has.
units on there.
Yeah. So what I'll do, I'll make a list of the inns and the hotels based on units and lot size.
That'd be
So
great.
it's easy to look up.
Thank
and,
you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
and-
Scott.
I can,
Thank you.
It might not be exact,
Comprehensive, but it's a good start.
but it's a good,
Yeah.
something we can sink our teeth into.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, is there anything else from anybody? Hearing nothing, may I have a motion for adjournment, please?
So moved. Second.
Anyone opposed to that? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for a very quick and efficient meeting.